you close your eyes and picture prehistory, what do you see? A cold, dark night, a damp stone cave, a small group of humans huddled around a dying fire. While outside, the roars of predators echo through the night. Cave lions, saber-toothed cats, giant bears, creatures that could kill you with a single bite. But you'd be wrong. The most terrifying predator had no fangs, no claws. It had calculating eyes, a hand that could grip stone, and a brain that could plan how to kill you. That predator was another human. For most of human history, we were never alone. Homo sapiens shared the world with several cousin species: Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, and most hauntingly, Homo heidelbergensis, a dark ancestor we often try to forget. They left behind bones, tools, and bloodstains on the rock, not from wild beasts, but from clashes, human versus human. Brutal, cold, sometimes to eat, sometimes to dominate. A history we rarely dare to confront because it reflects the darkest parts of ourselves. Art 2, Homo heidelbergensis, Survival in Chaos. Now imagine Earth 700,000 years ago. No maps, no cities, just a planet in constant upheaval. Wild, violent, and unforgiving. The climate flipped like a coin. Lush green one day, frozen wasteland the next. Forests snapped under ice, rivers cracked and dry. Animals migrated and vanished. And in the heart of this chaos, Homo heidelbergensis emerged, a human species caught between the ancient and the modern. They stood as tall as we do, with bones thick as steel, and brains big enough to understand, to remember, to plan. They knew how to craft stone axes, to harness fire, to hunt, not just to survive, but to conquer. But their world was far from peaceful. It was home to cave lions bigger than today's tigers, giant crocodiles waiting at riverbanks, and saber-toothed cats lurking in the tall grass. Every day was a battle. There was no tomorrow for the weak, and once the animals had been pushed back, Homo heidelbergensis turned their gaze to each other. Other groups, other bands, not to make friends, but to decide, ally or prey. Because in that world, intelligence wasn't enough. You had to be bold, you had to be ruthless, and sometimes you had to kill before being killed. Art 3, the greatest enemy, our own kind. Imagine you're an archaeologist. You're gently brushing away layers of ancient soil, uncovering fossilized human bones that have slept for hundreds of thousands of years. But then, you notice something is wrong. A skull, shattered right in the center of the forehead. An arm bone, broken clean, with sharp cut marks. A stone axe, leaving deep slicing wounds into the thigh, right where the meat is thickest. And worse, the bones show burn marks, cleanly stripped of flesh. This wasn't a predator. This wasn't an accident. This was a human, attacking, killing, and butchering another human. At first, archaeologists thought it was desperation, starvation during harsh times. But when these patterns began to appear again and again across Europe and Africa, a chilling truth began to emerge. Homo heidelbergensis, our ancestor, wasn't just a social creature. They were also capable of hatred, of punishment, of killing, and at times of cannibalism. If they could share the meat of a hunted animal, they could share the body of a fallen rival. War, murder, revenge. Maybe they didn't begin with kingdoms or empires. Maybe they began on a rainy afternoon, 400,000 years ago, when a stranger stepped onto the wrong territory and never returned. Part 4, Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Ghosts. Hidden deep inside the Rocky Mountains of Atapuerca, northern Spain, is a place not meant for the faint of heart. A pit, pitch black, 13 meters deep, accessible only through narrow, slippery passageways like the throat of the earth itself. Its name? Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones. And that name is no exaggeration. Here, archaeologists unearthed over 7,000 human bone fragments, belonging to at least 28 individuals of Homo heidelbergensis. They weren't carefully buried. They weren't laid to rest with honor. They were tossed, one on top of the other, like discarded flesh. And then came Skull 17, a nearly complete cranium with 2 sharp fractures in the forehead, not from a fall, not from an animal, but from a deliberate, precise, fatal blow to the face. Beside it, a quartzite hand axe, so finely crafted, so perfect. Scientists named it Excalibur. But why was it there? Was it the murder weapon? A peace offering? A burial ritual? A curse? No one knows. What we do know is this: Cima de los Huesos is more than a pit of bones. It's a vault of violence, a silent archive where the secrets of our species and the shadow of our most primal instincts still refuse to stay buried. Part 5, the Bodto Skull, stripped for meat, not for burial. Deep in the Awash Valley of Ethiopia, once a lush, life-giving riverbed, archaeologists made a discovery that's difficult to stomach. A 600,000-year-old human skull, not shattered, not gnawed by beasts, but deliberately processed with unsettling precision. On the bone's surface, clean, sharp cut marks appeared, right at the major muscle attachments, where the flesh is thickest and easiest to remove. These weren't scratches from scavengers. They weren't random scrapes. They were stone tool incisions, done skillfully and with clear intent. There were no flowers, no burial mound, no sign of farewell. Just stone tools and the unmistakable work of a prehistoric blade. Some scholars suggest it may have been a sacred ritual, an ancient body-opening rite, but others offer a simpler explanation. They ate the dead. So now, the question isn't, did they eat each other? But rather, why? Was it hunger, power, hatred, or something deeper? A darkness we modern humans still don't want to confront. Part 6. Cannibalism, custom, or desperation. Spain, Ethiopia, and now Kenya. In a prehistoric site in northern Africa, archaeologists unearthed a human shin bone, over 1.45 million years old. But the shocking part wasn't its age. It was the precise, practiced cut marks, the kind left by someone expertly removing flesh. Why? Cannibalism? It sounds savage, but pause. Step into the mind of a desperate creature in the Stone Age. Human meat isn't a good food source. It's low in fat, low in calories. A human body offers only a tenth the energy of a juvenile elephant. So why choose to eat your own kind? Maybe it was starvation, but maybe it was a statement, a warning, a punishment, a social execution. You betrayed us. You don't get a burial. You get stripped, eaten, erased. Some modern primates have been observed doing the same, consuming the fallen alpha, not for nourishment, but for domination. Could Homo heidelbergensis have done the same? Maybe hunger was just the excuse, and power was the true reason, asserted through teeth and stone. Part 7. Hunters' tools and murder weapons. Travel back 300,000 years, when Europe's forests were still lush and Ethiopia's skies blazed with heat. At opposite ends of the continent, Homo heidelbergensis was quietly redefining what it meant to wield a weapon. In Schoningen, Germany, a pile of fossilized wood revealed 2-meter-long spears carved from spruce. Their weight was balanced perfectly, with the center of gravity toward the tip, engineered to fly straight and pierce deep. This wasn't a crude stick. It was a killing tool, designed to slice through flesh and drop prey instantly. In the Afar region of Ethiopia, traces of stone-tipped spears, dating back 279,000 years, tell another story. They used tree resin, animal sinew, and sharpened stone to create projectiles so precise, so lethal, they rival today's arrows. Each one was a product of engineering, a mind that could build, adapt, and innovate. And not just stone or wood. They also carved elephant bone into blades, sharp enough to gut a wild beast or skin another human being. Now imagine this technology, this ancient ingenuity turned against fellow humans. A forest ambush, a rival group stumbling into the wrong hunting ground, a flash of red on skin as the spear strikes, the hiss of air, the silence that follows. In the hands of Homo heidelbergensis, a weapon wasn't just survival, it was murder. Two faces of evolution, the genius to invent, the cruelty to destroy. They didn't just learn to hunt animals, they learned to hunt each other. And when night fell and the spears pointed into the darkness, one question always remained: who's next? And the answer could be anyone who crossed their line. Part 8. Violence. Not the exception, but the design. There's something disturbingly consistent about ancient human skulls: the wounds. From Cranium 17 in Spain, 2 clean fractures to the forehead, to Bodto, Ethiopia, stripped of flesh just after death, to Kabwe, Zambia, shattered like someone had smashed it deliberately. These aren't accidents. They're not predator attacks. They're kill shots, targeted at the weakest points. Forehead, crown, base of the skull. One strike. Fatal, intentional, skilled, malicious. And they're not rare. These injuries appear again and again, across continents, across centuries. From jungle valleys to icy plateaus, violence followed humanity wherever it went. Not just in wars over territory, but within groups themselves. Justice, punishment, revenge. Long before we ever said the word war, humans may have understood a darker truth: that violence is a form of social control. No uniforms, no flags, just a look, a silence, and then a rock to the skull for breaking an unwritten rule. And here's the truly terrifying part. Maybe violence wasn't a glitch in our evolution. Maybe it was a feature, a tool we used not just to survive, but to organize ourselves. Part 9. Compassion, cooperation, and betrayal. Despite the brutality, Homo heidelbergensis also left behind a very different story, a story of care, of kinship, of something deeply human. Archaeologists discovered the skeleton of an individual with a severely fractured hip, an injury that would have made walking, hunting, even basic survival nearly impossible. And yet, they lived for years. That could only happen if they were fed, cared for, protected by others. They weren't left behind. They were carried through forests, over mountains, across winters. This wasn't instinct, it was compassion. Homo heidelbergensis knew how to cooperate, share food, protect the weak. They weren't just bloodthirsty beasts. They were small, tight-knit communities of 15 to 30 individuals. Maybe families, maybe tribes. With such closeness also made fertile ground for betrayal. And when trust was broken, the cost could be death. Not by hunger, not by predator, but by the hands of someone who once shared a fire and a meal. Cooperation built the strength of humanity, but betrayal was the spark that often ignited the darkest violence. Part 10. Language, culture, and the birth of ritual. They didn't have dictionaries. They didn't form neat sentences. But perhaps Homo heidelbergensis could speak in their own way. A tiny bone buried in the throat, the hyoid, reveals that they had a vocal structure similar to modern humans. Not just growls, not primal screams, but controlled sounds, intentional vocalizations. They hunted together. They made tools in repeatable designs. They lived in groups. None of this could happen without communication. And where there is communication, culture begins. But the deeper question is, did they remember? Did they mourn? At Cima de los Huesos, where that strange pit of bones lies, some believe the bodies were not thrown like trash, but placed there intentionally. Was it a primitive burial ritual? A recognition that death was not the end, but something to be confronted? Or was it exile? A graveyard for the outcasts, the condemned? No one knows for sure. But one thing is clear: They thought. They remembered. And they wanted to leave something behind, even if it was just a quartz hand axe laid beside the dead. From that act, perhaps, the seed of ritual was planted, and with it, the first glimmer of belief. Part 11. At the crossroads between instinct and intellect. If you trace the branches of human evolution like the limbs of an ancient tree, you'll find a strange fracture, a node, where the branches split across 3 continents. Standing right at that crossroads is Homo heidelbergensis, the gatekeeper between wild instinct and emerging intellect. In Europe, they evolved into Neanderthals, robust, enduring survivors of the ice. In Asia, they became the mysterious Denisovans, leaving genetic traces from Tibet to Papua. And in Africa, they gradually became us, Homo sapiens, not the strongest, not the smartest, but strong enough to survive, clever enough to create, and flexible enough to adapt. They were the hinge of humanity, where hunting instinct gave way to memory, to language, to choice. Homo heidelbergensis was not the beginning, and not the end. They were the turning point, where humanity didn't just choose how to live, but how to become human. And their blood, their choices, their mistakes still flow through us today, in every cell, every reflex, every vague ancient fear. We are not just their descendants. We are the continuation of the story they left unfinished. Part 12, Conclusion. We are them, they are us. You may have never heard their name before. Homo heidelbergensis, an unfamiliar, distant echo from the depths of prehistory. But they are within you, not just through genes, but through essence. They knew love when they carried an injured companion across the forest instead of leaving them behind. They knew violence when a stranger crossed into their territory. They knew care when they shared berries with their young, and they knew punishment when trust was betrayed. They lived in a world full of darkness, and yet they were the ones who lit the first fires. And that flame has burned for 700,000 years in how we tell stories, forgive, rage, and love. If the world today feels divided, hateful, torn between love and anger, don't blame modernity. It's not new. It's the oldest legacy we carry, from those first hands that gripped stone and brought it down. We are the heirs of a species that was deeply flawed and deeply remarkable, a species that stood between violence and compassion, between beast and human. Homo heidelbergensis didn't disappear. They simply changed shape. They live in you, in me, in all of us. And perhaps the real question isn't, where did we come from? But what will we become with what they left behind? Even today, thousands of years later, we still carry their shadows in our fears, our instincts, our choices, and our hopes. The story of Homo heidelbergensis is not just ancient history. It's a mirror, one that reflects what we were and warns us what we might become again. If we want to understand ourselves, not just as individuals, but as a species, we have to look back, because sometimes the only way forward is through the ashes of the fire that once kept us alive. Subscribe to our channel for more stories from the edge of extinction, the roots of humanity, and the echoes we still carry. New episodes every week, because the past is not gone. It's just waiting to be remembered. Hit the bell to never miss an echo.